In recent times, more and more cars that come from China have begun to be sold here overseas, and many people, myself included, feel as if some sort of revolution is going to happen in our automotive industry. With this growth in popularity for Chinese vehicles, we have asked ourselves the question, how did this all begin? Well, if you want to know the answer, you've clicked on the right video. Today, I'll be talking about the Chinese car industry's history, how it started, how it is today, and some of the biggest manufacturers from China. With all that said, this is AutoFil, and I hope you enjoyed this video.
我在北京
You probably know that the automotive industry truly became a great part of the world's economy in the early 1900s. That is correct, but that doesn't mean the Chinese industry was established around that time. In fact, this country's automotive industry wouldn't be properly established until 1931. That year, the first ever Chinese-built motor vehicle was made. That being a truck called the Minsheng or Zhongshan 75. You're probably wondering why I'm referring to it using two different brand names, and no, it's not because it was sold under two brands, but because we have too little knowledge about the 75 to know what it was precisely called. We don't have many photos of it, with all of them being black and white, and most of them only depicting the 75's chassis as shown on screen right now. The closest we have to knowing what it really looked like is this drawing, which is based on other photos of the actual vehicle. Regardless of what the car was really, we do know that the Minsheng/Zhongshan 75 was only a prototype, but was meant to be put into production. However, as production was being planned, the factory where the 75 was supposed to be built was destroyed during the Japanese invasion of Manchuria in September that year. So, production of the truck never truly began. Anyway, with that said, it wouldn't be until 1956 when the actual first Chinese production vehicle was built, that being the Jifang CA10 truck, made by FAW, one of China's first car companies, and one that still operates today. The CA10 technically isn't a truck with Chinese roots, as it was actually a rebadged ZIS 150, another military truck, this time made by the Soviets, which at the time were allied to China. Now, the Jifang CA10 is a commercial truck, and it wouldn't be long until passenger vehicles began to be made for civilian use. One of the most notable out of these has to be the Dongfeng CA71, a luxury saloon that began production in 1958. Like the aforementioned Jifang, the CA71 was also made by FAW and used many parts outsourced from foreign manufacturers. But in contrast to the Jifang, the Dongfeng was built in China. The parts taken from other companies include the chassis and engine, which were reverse engineered from the Mercedes-Benz W120, and the body, which was based on the Simca Vedette. The Dongfeng CA71 ended up being made for 3 years, which is surprising when put into account that only 20 to 30 CA71s were made, some of which are thought to be rebadged Simca Vedettes, but that's only a rumour. Anyway, moving on, the 1950s and 1960s was when many of China's modern-day automakers were established, such as Beijing, also known as BAIC, SAIC, Nanjing, and the Second Automobile Works, which is now known as Dongfeng Motor Corporation. Outside of that, more cars from this time period include the Shanghai SH760 and the arguably gorgeous Hongqi CA72. Even with these passenger cars, they were only really made for government officials and nobody outside of that. Therefore, cars built in China were a minority compared to the massive amount of cars imported from other regions, and by that I mean the Soviet Union, Japan, and from nowhere else. Taxi companies, for example, would import Japanese saloons such as the Nissan Bluebird and the Toyota Crown. This was in the 80s, but in the 70s, China's car industry would take its growth a step further by beginning a push for more and more joint ventures with foreign car companies. This would eventually lead to AMC signing a 20-year contract with BAIC to produce Jeeps in Beijing in 1983. The following year, Volkswagen entered into an agreement with SAIC, and Peugeot signed a contract to build cars in the city of Guangzhou. Thanks to these joint ventures, China's production volume increased significantly, with many of these ventures still prospering today, an example being SAIC Volkswagen. Speaking of this joint venture, SAIC VW's first production model was the VW Santana, which in China was initially a facelifted model, slightly different from the European one. The Santana nameplates soon became very popular there, and so Volkswagen continued to use the nameplates for 3 generations, the second of which received multiple facelifts, until the nameplate was retired in 2013. VW also has a joint venture with FAW, whose first car was the Audi 100, Chinese version of which was built locally. It's also worth mentioning Dongfeng's love triangle with Peugeot and Citroën, which would culminate in the trio forming a partnership in 1997 as Dongfeng Peugeot Citroën. Initially, it was only Citroën that was in a partnership with Dongfeng, beginning in 1992, as Peugeot wouldn't join in until 1997, when Peugeot's own joint venture with the city of Guangzhou collapsed. The first car to come out of Dongfeng Citroën would be the Citroën Fukang, a hatchback based on the European ZX. It was sold from 1992 until 2009, with a saloon variant called the Fukang 988 being added to the range in 1998. Now, it's not like Citroën didn't try selling any cars prior to this joint venture, as it did sell the CX, known for its hydropneumatic suspension in China in 1984. Moving on, we should now continue with the history of China's car industry, as in 1994, several big corporations entered the market, such as Great Wall Motor, Chery, BYD and Geely. Now, I recommend that the viewer remember these names, as I will be coming back to these companies later on in this video. Anyways, the turn of the century brought with it many new developments in the Chinese automotive industry, such as the creation of Geely's first production model, the HQ. One of those developments was China entering the World Trade Organization in 2001, leading to car tariffs being reduced, which allowed for a decrease in the prices of imported cars. Thanks to these changes, more foreign manufacturers would begin to sell their cars in China with the help of local companies. For example, BMW entered the Chinese car market through a joint venture with Brilliance Auto in 2003, allowing the German automaker to sell its European cars and build cars there. In fact, BMW Brilliance, as the partnership is called, even has its own Chinese-only brand named Zenoro, which specializes in EVs based on pre-existing BMWs. General Motors also entered the fray of foreign car makers in China in 2002, through a partnership with SAIC and another company called Guangxi Auto. The first car built by this joint venture ended up being the Wuling Sunshine, a minivan with a variety of inline-4 engines. The Sunshine was sold all the way until 2013, when the second generation was introduced, with the car itself still being sold to this day. With all that said, it's not like only foreign manufacturers are entering the Chinese market, as many, and I mean many, Chinese automakers have found their way to overseas markets thanks to China entering the WTO. SAIC was one of the first Chinese companies to enter overseas markets, as in 2007, the company merged with Nanjing, which at the time owned the British MG marque. This merger effectively made MG a marque owned by SAIC. Knowing that overseas markets are familiar with the MG brand, SAIC took the opportunity to begin selling its cars as MGs in and outside of China. This would lead to the newly established MG Motor entering Chile's car market as early as 2008, selling SAIC's Rowe 750 and 550 as MG branded cars. In 2011, SAIC took it a step further by reintroducing MG to its original homeland, the UK, and since then, MG has sold many models in many different territories, not just original MGs, but also rebadged models sold by SAIC in China. MGs currently sold today include the MG4, HS, ZS, and MG3. Speaking of SAIC Motor, the company also ended up acquiring another British company in 2010, that being the LDV Group, known for the LDV Maxus van. Using the van's nameplate, SAIC, let's say, refounded LDV as Maxus Automotive in 2011 and revealed the new V80 as the new brand's first model, although this new V80 is literally just a rebadged LDV Maxus. The V80 was originally only sold in China and Thailand, but soon enough, Maxus began exporting it to Colombia, Ireland, and the UK, among others. In fact, in China, there's even a plug-in hybrid fuel cell version called the FCV80 and allegedly has a range of over 300 miles. Can you believe that? Outside of that, Maxus also sells pickups, trucks, and other vans. I think that should be enough about SAIC and its overseas brands, so how about we talk a little bit about BYD, with the name standing for Build Your Dreams, an imaginative name indeed. BYD Auto was established in 2003 after the bigger BYD Corporation bought another automaker called Qinchuan Automobile. The first car to be made by BYD was 2005's BYD Flyer, a city car originally produced by Qinchuan. Soon, BYD's first original model was revealed, that being the F3, a saloon with a design ripping off the Toyota Corolla. BYD did this by reverse engineering the Corolla, although I honestly think that the rear end of the F3R hatchback version resembles the Daewoo Lacetti, but I could be wrong. Copying and then modifying car designs, as BYD calls it, would be a trend with the company's car designs for quite some time, with models such as the F0 City Car copying the Toyota Aygo, and the S8 convertible resembling the Mercedes CLK at the front and the Renault Megane CC at the back. Fortunately for BYD, the company had modified its car's designs enough to convince the Chinese court not to push charges against BYD for patent infringement. Good for them. Anyway, despite its heinous acts of ripping off foreign cars, BYD is well known for being a pioneer in the EV and hybrid car industry, introducing the world's first ever mass-produced plug-in hybrid vehicle, that being the F3DM, a plug-in hybrid version of the F3 in 2008. It began retail sales in 2010 after being sold as a fleet vehicle for governments, and was sold until 2013. Despite the great milestone BYD achieved with this car, the F3DM didn't sell well, ending its lifespan with only a little over 3,000 models sold. Moving on, BYD introduced its first EV in 2009, called the E6, and had better sales than the F3DM, still being sold today. BYD's entrance into overseas markets also began with this model, with the E6 being briefly sold in America as a fleet vehicle. The next year, Mercedes formed a partnership with BYD, creating a new brand called Denza that would focus on new energy vehicles. After that, 2012 saw the creation of BYD's Dynasty series of models, named after various Chinese dynasties. The first car in this series was the Qin, which was sold in Costa Rica among other places outside of China. With that, I reckon that we should move on to the 2020s, when BYD's overseas expansion truly began. Many more models, such as the Atto 3, Tang and Seal, have been introduced, and the company has begun selling a lot of cars in Europe, Asia and Australia, among other regions. Many models are still yet to arrive here overseas from China, and I think we'll see more soon. In fact, many more Chinese automakers are set to arrive here, and as I said at the very beginning of this video, this will all lead up to a sort of revolution in our automotive industry. I'm excited for what's to come, and come to think of it, China is much more advanced in terms of technology and engineering than we think. Therefore, these upcoming brands and models are going to be something we've never seen before. Anyway, I think that should be enough about China's automotive industry for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to like and subscribe. I also hope that you might have learned something about the Chinese car industry. There is much more to talk about, but this video is already getting pretty long. But maybe I'll make a part 2, who knows. Anyway, if you have any video suggestions, feel free to share them in the comments down below. With all that out of the way, this is AutoFil, see you later.